Winter can be beautiful, snowflakes drifting lazily to the ground, the silence of a storm blanketing the world. But when you're alone surrounded by snow, everything can change. These are the stories of winter's darker side, the side where people get lost, trapped, or worse. Stories that will make you think twice the next time you step out into the snow. Ryan had been on the road for hours. His car's headlights barely pierced through the storm, and the visibility was dropping fast. He'd always been a practical guy, prepared for emergencies, a full tank of gas, warm clothes, a GPS that should have been reliable. But the GPS kept sending him down smaller and smaller back roads, until the pavement gave way to gravel, and the gravel turned to mud. By the time he realized he'd taken a wrong turn, it was too late. Ryan tried calling for help, but there was no signal, no cars, no houses, nothing but snow and trees for miles. He figured he'd walk back to the main road. He'd been down this route before and it wasn't far. But as he walked, the storm got worse. The wind picked up, the snow swallowed him whole, and soon he couldn't see anything. Relief flooded him and he followed the sound, pushing through the storm. But when he broke through the trees, he didn't find the road. He found something else. A single running car, its engine still warm, but no one around. No sign of anyone for miles. Ryan never made it out of the woods. His body was found 3 days later, frozen solid, not far from the car. But there was something they couldn't explain. His footprints didn't lead back to the car. Instead, they led farther into the storm. Elise and Daniel were supposed to have a relaxing weekend away from the world. A little cabin, a warm fire, and snow falling gently outside. Just the two of them. But the storm didn't stop. By the time Daniel suggested they head home, it was already too late. With no way out, Elise agreed they'd stay the night. They'd survive the storm. They always had before. But as the hours passed, Elise noticed something unsettling. The sound of snow falling outside was different. There was no longer the quiet, peaceful settling of flakes. Instead, it was the sound of footsteps. At first she thought it was the wind, but the footsteps were too deliberate, too heavy. Someone was outside. But when Daniel stepped outside to check, there was no one. No sign of anyone anywhere. Just the endless blinding snow. He came back inside, but his face was pale. Something about the whole situation felt off. They spent the night listening to the footsteps that were heavy and slow, and always just outside the cabin. Never too close, but never far enough to dismiss. As dawn approached, the storm didn't let up. Daniel decided they needed to leave, but as they packed, Elise noticed something chilling. The footsteps outside, they weren't new. The snow was untouched. The only footprints in the snow were theirs. Sarah had underestimated the storm. Her car wasn't equipped for this kind of weather, but she had to get home. So she decided to keep driving. A small voice in the back of her mind told her to turn around, but she didn't. She thought she would be able to make it. The road grew worse, her headlights barely cutting through the whiteout. And then the inevitable happened. A slick patch of ice sent her car spinning into a snowbank. She wasn't far from a town, but no one would be on the road in this storm. She sat there, waiting for a tow truck or for the storm to at least let up. But the minutes stretched into hours, and the cold began to seep into her bones. Then she heard it, a car, just a few feet away. The headlights illuminated the snow for a moment, but there was no sound of an engine, no tires crunching on snow. It was as if the car had just appeared. She rolled down her window, desperate for help. But the man didn't say a word. He simply stared at her. His eyes were dark black and empty. A chill ran down her spine. He didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there staring into the car. When Sarah looked back, the man was gone, and there was no trace of the car. No tire tracks in the snow, nothing. Just the quiet, endless storm. Sarah never made it to her parents' house. She was found days later, frozen to death in her car. But there was one thing the police couldn't explain. The snow around her car was untouched. Not a single footprint, not even her own. 3 people, 3 stories, and not one of them made it out. So the next time you're stuck in the snow or walking in the dark, remember, there's no telling who or what might be out there watching. Stay safe, and remember, winter is always more dangerous than you think. If you enjoyed these stories, hit that like button, subscribe, and share your own winter horror experience in the comments below. Don't forget, sometimes the scariest stories aren't the ones we hear, but the ones we live through.